Eli had always loved the quiet of the forest behind his small home. On most days he wandered there alone, listening to the gentle hum of the creek, watching leaves ripple in the wind and feeling the soft moss beneath his boots. It was a peaceful place, untouched by the construction and machines of the nearby human settlement. Here, Eli could think, repair gadgets, or simply watch the small animals move about their lives. The forest was his sanctuary, a pocket of calm in a chaotic world. It was late afternoon, and the sun hung low in the sky, painting the treetops with a soft gold. Eli was near the creek, adjusting a small water filtration device he had designed to provide clean water to his home. He hummed softly to himself, enjoying the quiet and the steady sound of water flowing over smooth stones. The work was simple but satisfying. As he reached down to tighten a loose joint, he noticed ripples in the water that didn't match the movement of the current. Eli froze, instinctively listening. There was no wind strong enough to cause such a disturbance. Something was moving in the creek. He stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. At first he thought it might be another colonist, someone perhaps bathing or fishing, but the figure in the water was unlike anything he had ever seen. The being's skin shimmered with soft, iridescent colors, reflecting the sunlight in gentle waves. Its limbs were long and elegant, its hair floating on the surface of the water like strands of liquid light. Eli's heart raced. He had read about alien life, about the possibilities of beings far different from humans, but he had never expected to see one with his own eyes. He wanted to look away, to tell himself it was a trick of the light, but curiosity rooted him to the spot. The alien moved gracefully, her movements fluid, as if she were a part of the creek itself. Eli could see muscles shifting beneath the luminous skin, but it was her face that drew him most. At first it was alien, strange, and mesmerizing. But then, in an instant, her features seemed to shift. Her eyes, wide and expressive, seemed almost human, filled with intelligence and something that resembled understanding. Her lips curved in the faintest suggestion of a smile, and Eli felt a strange warmth spreading through him, a connection he could not explain. He wanted to speak, to call out, but words failed him. Instead, he merely watched, afraid that any sudden movement might scare her away. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The creek, the forest, the sunlit leaves. Everything was silent except for the small sound of running water and the soft breathing of two beings meeting for the first time. Then, she noticed him. Her gaze turned toward the edge of the creek where Eli crouched behind a cluster of ferns. Their eyes met, and Eli felt something profound, a message without words. She did not flee. She did not react with fear. Instead, she simply looked at him, her expression calm and open, almost inviting him to understand her. Eli's mind raced. Could she communicate? Was she intelligent? How had she come here? His rational thoughts collided with the awe-building inside him. Every instinct told him to run, to flee from something unknown. But his curiosity and sense of wonder held him in place. Slowly, he stepped a little closer, making no sudden movements. The alien watched, her head tilting slightly, as if to study him. Eli could see the water clinging to her shimmering skin, droplets sparkling like tiny stars. There was a beauty to her, but it was not just in her form. It was in the calm, intelligent presence she carried, the quiet way she moved, and the feeling that she belonged here as much as he did. He wanted to reach out, but hesitated. He thought of what humans had done when faced with the unknown, how fear and aggression often led to mistakes. Eli wanted to do differently. He wanted to observe, to understand, to connect without harming. Minutes passed. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the creek. Eli slowly sat down on a rock at the edge of the water, keeping his distance but not turning away. The alien seemed to accept this, continuing her gentle movements in the water. Occasionally she looked at him, as if acknowledging his presence without fear or suspicion. The sound of the creek, combined with the alien's movements, created a strange harmony. Eli felt as though he were part of something larger than himself. The forest, the water, the sunlight, and this being formed a connection that was almost spiritual. He realized that life in the universe was far richer and stranger than any story he had read or any science he had studied. As the light began to fade, Eli reluctantly stood up. He knew he could not stay forever. Yet he felt a pull, a need to return. There was something about her, about this moment, that called to him. He needed to understand, to see her again, to learn more about the being who had entered his life so unexpectedly. He whispered softly, more to himself than to her, "I will come back." The alien tilted her head, her expression almost approving, before slipping beneath the water and disappearing from view. The ripples lingered for a moment, reflecting the last light of the sun, and then the creek returned to its quiet, natural rhythm. Eli walked home slowly, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He tried to imagine what species she might belong to, where she had come from, and how she had ended up in this forest. But the questions were endless, and the answers were nowhere in sight. All he knew was that he had witnessed something extraordinary, something that challenged his understanding of life and the universe. Back at his small home, he stared out the window at the forest. The trees swayed gently in the evening breeze. The creek murmured softly, and somewhere beyond the shadows, she might still be there, watching, waiting, or simply existing in her own world. Eli felt a strange mix of fear, awe, and excitement. He thought about telling someone, a friend, a scientist, or even the local authorities. But the thought of taking her from her peaceful existence filled him with unease. He realized that this encounter was personal, something that could not be shared without changing it entirely. It was a secret, a gift, and a responsibility. That night, sleep did not come easily. Eli lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of what he had seen. The shimmer of her skin, the subtle morphing of her face, the way her eyes seemed to reach into his thoughts. All of it haunted him in the most beautiful way. He knew that tomorrow and the days after, he would return to the creek. He did not yet know how he would communicate, how he would bridge the gap between human and alien, but he felt a certainty deep in his heart that this meeting was not a coincidence. Something larger, something beyond human understanding was at play, and somewhere in the forest, under the dim light of a rising moon, the alien watched as well. Perhaps she was curious, perhaps cautious, or perhaps she had recognized the same spark that Eli felt, a connection that transcended language, species, and even worlds. For Eli, the encounter marked the beginning of something remarkable. The universe, once a distant and abstract idea, had suddenly become immediate, tangible, and alive, and it had come to him in the form of a being unlike anything he had ever imagined. He did not yet know what the future held, but for the first time in his life he felt a deep and unshakable certainty. Humanity, with all its curiosity, courage, and capacity for wonder, had a place in the vast, mysterious cosmos. And whatever this alien being represented, she had opened a door into the unknown, into discovery, and into a story far greater than himself. The next morning, Eli woke with the sunlight spilling into his small room. The memory of the alien in the creek was fresh in his mind, vivid and undeniable. Every detail, the shimmer of her skin, the fluid motion of her limbs, the strange, almost human quality of her face, replayed in his thoughts. He could not stay away. The forest called to him, and the creek seemed to hum in his imagination, as if urging him to return. After a quick breakfast, he packed a small bag with essentials, a notebook, pencils, his portable sound recorder, and a few simple tools he thought might help if he needed to communicate. He knew that words might not work, and he had no idea how she perceived language. Curiosity and caution guided him. He had to approach her carefully. The forest was quiet, the morning mist curling around the trunks of the tall trees. Birds called softly in the distance, and the creek sparkled as sunlight touched its surface. Eli moved slowly, his eyes scanning the water. He didn't know what to expect. She might be gone, or she might vanish at the first sign of a human. Yet as he approached a familiar bend, there she was, sitting in the shallow water. Her skin glimmered in the soft light, flowing like liquid crystal over her slender form. She moved with a grace that seemed to defy the water itself, and when her eyes met his, Eli felt the same strange connection as yesterday. Her face shifted subtly, the almost human features softening his fear, replacing it with wonder. He stopped at the edge of the creek, careful not to make any sudden movements. She did not move away. Instead, she raised a delicate hand, a slow, deliberate gesture, almost as if she were saying, "I see you, and I am not afraid." Eli's heart pounded. He wanted to speak, but he realized that speech might not matter. He would need to find another way to communicate. He opened his notebook and began to draw, slowly sketching symbols, lines, and shapes. He held it out to her, hoping she could understand the attempt at communication. She tilted her head, watching the pencil move, and then slowly raised her hand toward the surface of the water. A ripple traveled across her skin, forming soft, glowing patterns that seemed almost like words. Eli's eyes widened. This was communication, of a kind he had never imagined. For hours, they continued this silent exchange. "Eli drew," she responded with flowing lights, and slowly, a rudimentary understanding began to form. He realized she was intelligent, curious, and capable of learning. She was not a wild creature. She was a being with thoughts, feelings, and perhaps even emotions like his own. Curiel, as he would later come to know her name, revealed this in the most subtle way. She used the glowing patterns on her skin to mimic some of the shapes he drew, and in response, Eli pointed to himself and wrote Eli. She paused, then mirrored the letters and soft ripples on the water. It was their first real connection, a name, a recognition, a bridge between species. Days passed. Eli returned to the creek every morning and evening. Each session brought new understanding. He learned that she could manipulate the colors on her skin in subtle ways, almost like music, expressing concepts beyond human words. He learned to respond with drawings, gestures, and sounds. He even began to hum tones, and to his amazement she responded with harmonic patterns, her glowing skin pulsing in rhythm with his voice. Through these exchanges, Eli discovered more about her. She came from a distant star system, a planet light-years away, where her people explored worlds to understand life, energy, and ecosystems. She had been studying this planet when a sudden storm had damaged her spacecraft, leaving her stranded. She had adapted to the creek, using it as both shelter and a place to heal. Eli could hardly contain his excitement. The reality of standing before an alien being, learning her language, and beginning to understand her thoughts was overwhelming. But he also felt a deep responsibility. He had the power to either help her or inadvertently harm her. He approached every interaction with care, ensuring that his curiosity never became invasive. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Eli decided to show her human technology. He pulled out a small, portable gadget that emitted light and patterns. When he activated it, the alien's eyes widened, reflecting the shifting colors. She extended her hand, touching the device gently, and the patterns on her skin shifted into light. It was clear that she was learning, experimenting, and enjoying the novelty. Eli smiled, realizing that they were forming a bond that went beyond words. She responded to his presence with trust and curiosity, and he responded with patience and awe. It was a connection that felt almost sacred, a meeting of minds from two very different worlds. One evening, as the forest grew quiet and the stars began to appear, Eli dared a new approach. He pointed to the sky, then to her, and then to himself. He tried to convey the idea of her returning to her home, her people, if possible. She paused, her skin pulsing in soft, thoughtful waves. Then, gently, She touched his hand, her warmth sending a shiver through him. It was not a refusal, nor an acceptance, just a moment of shared understanding. They would find a way. Together, days turned into weeks. Eli continued to visit, bringing small gifts, water-resistant pigments for her skin patterns, samples of local plants, and small mechanical tools that she seemed fascinated by. She showed him aspects of her biology and abilities, how she could sense changes in water temperature, how her skin could absorb light and energy, and how her movements harmonized with the flow of the creek. Through these exchanges, Eli began to see the universe differently. Humans were often portrayed as small, fragile, and limited in their abilities. Yet here he was, standing beside a being from the stars, learning and adapting alongside her. He realized that the true strength of humanity was not in physical power or advanced technology alone, but in creativity, empathy, and the willingness to reach across boundaries that seemed impossible to cross. One morning, while the mist still clung to the trees, Eli noticed a subtle change in her expression. Her face, already capable of shifting forms, seemed to soften in a way that mirrored human emotion more closely than before. She looked at him with a mixture of curiosity, trust, and something that felt almost like affection. Eli's heart leapt. He understood that this bond was deepening, that trust had been earned, and that something remarkable was unfolding before him. Eli spent hours teaching her small, human gestures and signs. He pointed to the sun, the moon, and the stars, attempting to convey the human understanding of the cosmos. She responded with patterns of light and gentle musical tones that resonated in the clearing. It was a slow process, but progress was undeniable. One evening, as the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Eli spoke aloud for the first time in her presence, using simple words. Eli, friend, safe. She tilted her head, the glowing patterns on her skin shifting like a soft sigh. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she pulsed in response. Eli felt a surge of joy. They had shared a concept, a simple message, and she had understood. Communication, once impossible, was beginning to take shape. The bond grew stronger. Eli realized that humanity had an advantage beyond technology, the ability to care, to understand, and to connect across impossible divides. This realization filled him with hope. If humans could reach out to one being from the stars, perhaps they could reach beyond themselves, finding allies and friends in the vast universe. Days passed, and their connection became routine but never boring. The creek became their classroom, their playground, and their sanctuary. Each morning and evening brought new discoveries. Eli learned how she could manipulate the water and light to create shapes and subtle stories. He began to anticipate her gestures, and she seemed to respond to his, creating a silent dance of learning and understanding. Then, one late afternoon, something unusual happened. Eli noticed movement in the distant sky above the forest. Strange, glimmering streaks, almost like shadows, moved quickly across the horizon. Curiel's skin pulsed nervously, her movements sharp and alert. Eli's heart quickened. He had no idea what it was, but the change in her behavior made it clear that it was something important, something potentially dangerous. She did not speak, but the patterns on her skin were urgent, a rapid sequence of glowing pulses. Eli watched closely, trying to interpret the message. It was clear they were not alone, and the forest was about to be tested in ways he could not yet understand. Eli realized that their bond had prepared him for this moment. They had learned to trust each other, to understand subtle signs, and to communicate beyond words. Whatever was coming, he would face it with her, using every bit of human ingenuity, empathy, and courage he could muster. As the sun dipped behind the trees and shadows lengthened across the creek, Eli knew that this was only the beginning. The universe had revealed a glimpse of its vastness, and he had found a companion from the stars to explore it with him. Curiel's glowing presence reflected in the water, a promise of discovery, friendship, and challenges yet to come. And Eli, standing at the edge of the creek, felt a surge of determination. Humanity had always reached for the unknown, and now he understood why. They were capable of more than survival. They could connect, understand, and thrive in ways that transcended fear, distance, and difference. With Curiel, he would step further into the unknown, ready to face whatever the universe held. The creek whispered softly as evening fell. A bond had been formed, fragile yet strong, between a human and an alien. And in that quiet shared moment, the possibilities seemed endless. The morning dawned with a strange tension in the air. The forest behind Eli's home was usually calm, filled with the soft rustle of leaves and the steady murmur of the creek. Today, however, the birds were quiet, and the sunlight seemed dimmer through the trees. Eli sensed it immediately. Something was wrong. He hurried to the creek, his mind racing. Curiel was already there, her skin glowing faintly with a pattern of urgent waves. She rose from the water as he approached, her elongated limbs moving with the usual grace, but there was a sharp alertness in her stance. Her eyes, which had so often been full of curiosity and calm, now shone with intensity. Eli followed her gaze to the sky. At first he saw nothing unusual, only the soft blue stretching above the forest. Then, faint shapes appeared, streaks of light moving unnaturally fast, too precise to be birds or ordinary clouds. They twisted and shimmered, forming a pattern that made Eli's stomach tighten. Curiel's glowing skin pulsed rapidly, an unmistakable signal of warning. "They're coming," she said, in a way Eli could somehow understand, though no words were spoken. Her gestures were precise, and the patterns of light on her skin formed shapes that Eli interpreted as danger, an approaching force, intelligent and hostile. Eli's mind raced. He knew humans were vulnerable. They were small, lightly armed, and technologically behind many of the species in the galaxy. Yet he also knew something important. Humans had always thrived in impossible situations, relying on creativity, quick thinking, and cooperation. He would have to use everything he knew to protect not only himself but the settlement and Curiel. He ran back toward his home, gathering supplies. Tools, ropes, portable power devices, and anything that could help build defenses. Curiel followed, moving silently and swiftly through the trees, her presence a glowing guide. Together they reached the edge of the settlement, where humans were starting to notice the strange activity in the sky. Eli quickly called a small meeting with a few trusted neighbors. "We have visitors," he said, his voice urgent but calm. "They're not here to trade or explore.
They're scouts. We need to be smart, not panicked."
"We need to use what we have." The colonists looked at him with a mixture of fear and disbelief. They were used to minor emergencies. Storms, equipment failures, animal intrusions, but never an approaching alien vessel. Eli's calm authority and careful explanation helped steady their nerves. They agreed to help, ready to follow his lead. Meanwhile, Curiel hovered near the tree line, her skin glowing in rhythmic pulses. She demonstrated, without words, how she could sense movement and energy fields. Her presence allowed the humans to anticipate the scouts' approach, giving them a crucial advantage. She could see patterns in the approaching craft, and Eli began to understand their behavior. Together, they devised a plan. The humans would use the forest to their advantage. Simple, clever traps, tripwires connected to small explosive devices, camouflage nets to hide key areas, and reflective surfaces to confuse sensors were set. Eli instructed the colonists on how to use local terrain and technology creatively, turning the forest itself into a defensive ally. As the alien scouts drew closer, Eli felt the weight of responsibility. This was more than a battle of strength. It was a test of human ingenuity. Every tool, every trick, every subtle understanding of the environment mattered. He glanced at Curiel, her glowing eyes reflecting his own determination. They would face this threat together. The first scouts appeared above the treetops, small, fast-moving crafts that emitted low hums of energy. Curiel's skin flared in rapid pulses, signaling their precise movement patterns. The colonists held their positions, hidden behind trees, rocks, and makeshift barricades. Eli took a deep breath. Then, the first scout descended toward the creek, searching for life. Eli and the colonists had prepared. Reflective panels angled toward the sun confused its sensors, and tripwires triggered a small but powerful pulse from the portable devices they had set up. The scout faltered, its approach thrown off course. Curiel's skin pulsed brightly in approval. She darted forward, manipulating the water in the creek to create sudden waves that further disrupted the scout's path. It spun, trying to stabilize, but the human's clever traps forced it back into the sky. Eli's heart pounded. They were holding their own, but more scouts were approaching. He barked orders, directing colonists to reposition traps, set up barriers, and use the forest to obscure their movements. Curiel moved alongside him, using her abilities to detect weak points in the scout's systems. Together, human and alien worked in harmony, each complementing the other's skills. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, and the battle of wits continued. The scouts were intelligent, adaptive, and relentless, yet humans had something equally formidable: creativity and teamwork. Eli watched as a colonist used simple mirrors to reflect sunlight onto a scout's sensors, blinding it temporarily. Another set up a camouflaged pit, causing one of the crafts to stumble and retreat. Every success was small but meaningful, proving that human strategy and ingenuity could overcome superior technology. Curiel demonstrated her own subtle powers in ways that astonished the humans. She could manipulate the environment almost invisibly, bending light, shifting water currents, and sending pulses that interfered with the scout's sensors. Yet she relied on Eli to coordinate the human response, recognizing that their combined skills were far stronger than her own. By late afternoon, the scouts began to withdraw, retreating into the sky. Their mission, whatever it had been, was incomplete. Eli exhaled, relief washing over him. The colonists cheered softly, exhausted but triumphant. Curiel hovered in the creek, glowing softly, her body moving with elegance and relief. Eli approached her. "We did it," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through him. She responded with a slow pulse of light, the closest she had come to an expression of happiness. Eli realized then that humans were not only capable of facing danger, but of doing so with courage, intelligence, and heart. They might not be the strongest in the galaxy, but they were resourceful, creative, and capable of forming alliances that could change outcomes. As evening fell, the forest returned to its calm. The colonists helped prepare traps, reinforced their positions, and tended to minor injuries. Eli and Curiel sat by the creek, watching the water flow in peace, a stark contrast to the chaos that had dominated the day. He noticed a subtle shift in her face, the almost human features softening as she studied him. There was gratitude in her gaze, but also respect. They had fought together, and in doing so, they had learned about each other, about trust, and about the power of collaboration. Eli reflected on the day's events. Humans often underestimated themselves, believing they were small, weak, or insignificant on a cosmic scale. Yet today, they had faced a threat far beyond anything they had ever imagined, and had succeeded. The key had not been sheer strength, nor technology, nor luck. It had been human ingenuity, adaptability, and the willingness to work together with an entirely different species. Curiel's presence had been vital, but it was also clear that humans were capable of greatness on their own. Eli felt a surge of pride, not arrogance, but the kind of pride that comes from understanding one's potential. Humans were explorers, problem solvers, and collaborators. They could rise to challenges that seemed impossible, and in that they had something unique. Courage, tempered with creativity, empathy, and relentless determination. Night fell, and the first stars appeared in the sky. Eli lay on the soft moss by the creek, gazing upward. Curiel floated above the water, her glowing form mirrored in the surface below. They had survived the scouts, learned from each other, and forged a bond that transcended worlds. Eli realized that this was only the beginning. The universe was vast, full of wonders and dangers alike, and humanity had a role to play, not as mere observers, but as active participants capable of shaping their destiny. Curiel's skin pulsed gently in the rhythm of the creek. Eli reached out his hand, and she touched it with hers. No words were necessary. They had communicated, fought, and understood together. The bond was now stronger, built on shared experience and mutual respect. It was a moment that would stay with him forever, a reminder of what humans could achieve when they faced the unknown with courage and intelligence. As they sat together in the quiet night, Eli felt the first stirrings of something else, a sense of purpose beyond his small home, beyond the forest, beyond even the small human settlement. If humans could overcome this challenge, if they could work with beings like Curiel, then perhaps there were no limits to what they could accomplish. The galaxy was not a place to fear, but a place to explore, to learn, and to connect. Eli made a silent promise to himself. No matter what challenges came next, he would face them with the same courage, creativity, and determination. Humanity had proven today that it could rise to the impossible, and with allies like Curiel, there was no telling how far they could go. The creek whispered softly in the night, and for the first time, Eli felt a deep certainty. The universe was not indifferent to humanity. It had offered a test, and humans had passed not through raw power, but through ingenuity, empathy, and unwavering courage. Somewhere beyond the stars, other challenges waited. But he was ready. Humanity was ready. And Curiel, watching him with those strange, shifting eyes, seemed to understand. Together, human and alien, they would face whatever came next. The next morning, the forest seemed brighter than ever. Birds sang, and the creek's water sparkled under the sunlight like scattered diamonds. The events of the previous day, the scouts, the traps, the cleverness of humans working alongside Curiel, felt almost unreal. Eli had barely slept, his mind alive with thoughts of the universe, the alien being beside him, and the possibilities that lay ahead. Curiel was in the creek, her skin glowing softly in the morning light. She moved with the same grace as always, yet there was a subtle change. Her eyes, which had shifted toward human-like expressions in recent days, now carried a depth Eli had not seen before. They seemed to hold curiosity, wisdom, and something almost like emotion. He could not look away. The connection between them had grown beyond words or gestures. It had become something profound, something that transcended species or even understanding. Eli approached slowly, careful not to startle her. She tilted her head, and her skin pulsed gently, the patterns reflecting the rhythm of the creek. For a moment it felt as though time had stopped. Eli realized that everything they had shared, the learning, the danger, the victories, had brought them to this moment. He knelt by the water's edge, his hand hovering just above the surface. Curiel watched, and then, slowly, she reached out. Their hands met, human and alien, and a strange warmth passed between them. Eli felt a surge of understanding. It was as if their minds were touching, sharing the experiences of the past weeks without words, without gestures, without need for language. Curiel's skin began to shift more dramatically than ever before. Her form shimmered and changed, features softening, blending, until her face bore hints of human familiarity. Eli's heart raced. It was a subtle transformation, not to mimic him, but as if the universe itself had recognized the bond they had formed. She was still alien, undeniably so, yet now there was a reflection of humanity in her eyes, in the curve of her face, and in the light that danced across her skin. Eli realized something important. Humanity's true strength was not just in ingenuity or courage. It was in connection, in empathy, in the ability to reach across impossible distances, whether physical or emotional. This being from a distant world had recognized that strength. And in response, she had changed. Just enough to honor it. They spent the morning together exploring the forest and creek as they had in the past weeks. Eli showed her the small inventions he had made for the settlement, gadgets, tools, and clever devices designed to make life easier. Curiel examined each with fascination, using her abilities to understand how they worked. She responded with patterns and pulses of light that conveyed admiration, curiosity, and ideas. Then Eli spoke aloud for the first time in days. "Curiel," he said, voice steady, "you can go home soon. Your people can fix your ship." She paused, her glowing patterns flickering in thought. He continued, "But you don't have to leave.
You can stay as long as you want. With us."
With me?" Curiel's skin pulsed softly, a gentle wave of light washing across her form. She did not speak, but Eli understood her answer. She had chosen to remain, at least for now. Not out of obligation, but out of curiosity and trust. She had seen what humans were capable of: bravery, creativity, empathy, and she wanted to be part of their world, to learn more, to explore more. The day passed in shared discovery. Eli and Curiel experimented with ways to communicate even more deeply. He taught her simple human games, using pebbles, water, and light. She responded with astonishing creativity, bending water and light to create patterns and effects that delighted him. They laughed together, in the way humans laugh, and Eli felt a profound sense of joy. This alien from a distant star system had become more than a visitor. She was a companion, a partner in exploration, and a bridge between worlds. As evening approached, Eli reflected on the events that had led to this moment: the alien scouts, the threats, the clever human strategies. All had prepared them for this. Humanity had proven itself not through force, but through intelligence, creativity, and empathy. They had risen to the impossible and forged connections that could shape the future. Curiel moved closer to the creek's edge. Her glowing form mirrored perfectly in the water. Eli knelt beside her, reaching out to touch the surface, feeling the vibrations of energy that pulsed beneath her skin. It was beautiful, alien, and completely captivating. For a moment they were silent, connected not by words but by understanding, by trust, by something that transcended their differences. Then a subtle shift occurred. Curiel's skin shimmered brighter, her patterns flowing like water, and Eli noticed her face change again. The human-like hints deepened, not as mimicry, but as recognition. She was honoring the humanity that had welcomed her, that had fought alongside her, and that had reached across the cosmos to form a bond. Eli felt a surge of awe. This was more than friendship. It was a testament to what humans could achieve, even when faced with the unknown. Night fell, and the stars appeared above the forest in breathtaking clarity. Eli and Curiel sat by the creek, watching constellations they could not name. Eli pointed upward, trying to explain human understanding of the cosmos, of distant worlds, and of exploration. Curiel responded with pulses and harmonics that filled the night with gentle musical patterns. Together they shared stories without words, creating a narrative that neither species could fully capture alone, yet both could understand. Eli realized that this moment, this connection, was the culmination of everything he had learned about humanity. Humans were explorers, problem solvers, and creators. They could face threats far beyond their strength and emerge not just alive, but triumphant. They could connect across unimaginable divides, reaching minds and hearts that seemed alien, forming bonds that changed both parties. Curiel's glowing form pulsed softly in response to his thoughts. She had learned from humanity, just as he had learned from her. They were partners, companions in discovery, and witnesses to the potential of a universe where species could collaborate rather than compete. Eli felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that their bond was not just personal, but symbolic. A bridge between worlds, a promise of cooperation and understanding. Days turned into weeks. Curiel remained with the humans, exploring the planet, studying its flora and fauna, and learning about human society. She became a teacher as well, demonstrating her abilities to sense energy, manipulate water, and communicate through light. The colonists learned from her, and in turn, she learned from them. Eli watched in awe as humans adapted, creating tools and methods that impressed even her. Through it all, Eli felt the full weight of the experience. Humanity had risen to a challenge, not through domination, but through intelligence, courage, and empathy. They had faced the unknown and discovered that their greatest strengths lay not in weapons or machines, but in their minds, their hearts, and their willingness to connect with the unfamiliar. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant streaks of orange and pink, Eli and Curiel sat quietly by the creek. The water reflected the sky, shimmering like liquid fire. Eli reached out his hand and she touched it, the connection sending a warmth through him that transcended physical sensation. "You changed me," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "But I think I changed too." Curiel's skin pulsed softly, a gentle acknowledgement. She had learned from humanity, yes, but so had he, from her presence, her intelligence, and her trust. Together they had explored not just the creek, the forest, or the settlement, but the possibilities of cooperation, understanding, and the boundless potential of life in the universe. The night deepened, and stars sparkled overhead. Eli felt a surge of certainty. Humanity had a place in the cosmos, not as conquerors, not as passive observers, but as thinkers, creators, and collaborators. They could rise to challenges far beyond imagination, form connections with beings from distant worlds, and change the universe simply by being curious, brave, and empathetic. Curiel looked at him, her face shimmering with alien and human features alike. In her eyes, Eli saw wonder, respect, and something that resembled affection. They had shared danger, discovery, and triumph. They had proven that connection could overcome difference, that intelligence and empathy could triumph over fear, and that even a single human mind could make a difference in the vast cosmos. As they sat by the creek, the night calm around them, Eli knew that this story was only the beginning. Curiel would remain for now, learning and teaching, and humanity would continue to rise. Not through brute force, but through ingenuity, courage, and the endless capacity to understand and connect. And in that quiet shared moment, the universe itself seemed to hum with possibility. Eli smiled, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, humans could face them. They had proven it. They had stood with an alien from the stars, adapted, learned, and triumphed. They had created a bond that could change not only themselves, but the course of the universe. Curiel's skin pulsed softly as she looked at him again. The creek reflected their forms, human and alien, intertwined in purpose and trust. Eli understood then that the universe was no longer something distant or unknowable. It was alive, waiting for humans to rise, explore, and leave their mark. And as the first stars shone brightly above, Eli felt a deep certainty, a feeling that would stay with him forever. Humanity had risen. Humanity had shone, and together with beings like Curiel, there was no limit to what they could achieve. The days after the scout attack passed quietly at first. The forest returned to its usual rhythm. The birds sang, the creek flowed, and the human settlement slowly regained its sense of normalcy. Yet for Eli, nothing felt normal. Everything had changed. The universe was no longer a distant, abstract concept. It was alive, immediate, and full of possibilities. Curiel remained with him, moving through the forest as if it were her own world, her glowing skin now a familiar comfort rather than an object of wonder. Eli often watched her interact with the creek. She could manipulate the water, creating small ripples that reflected sunlight in dazzling patterns, or shape it into forms that moved as if alive. It was mesmerizing, and every day he discovered something new. He had come to understand her abilities, and through careful observation and patient study, he even began to predict her movements. The alien was a teacher as well as a companion, revealing a universe that humans had only imagined in books and dreams. One morning, Eli approached her with a new idea. He had been experimenting with a small, human-built drone, a simple craft designed to explore the forest from above. The drone was fragile, made from lightweight metals and powered by small solar cells. Yet Eli had spent weeks refining it, making it faster, more stable, and able to withstand small impacts. Curiel watched him as he demonstrated the drone. She tilted her head, her skin pulsing with soft colors, and then extended a hand to touch it. Eli held his breath. She moved gently, sensing its structure, understanding its function without needing words. He realized that their bond had reached a level beyond teaching or simple communication. They now learned from each other naturally, intuitively, as if they shared the same curiosity about the world. Eli activated the drone, and it lifted into the air with a soft hum. He guided it toward the treetops, showing Curiel how it could scout areas, find hidden paths, and even map the creek. She responded by sending gentle pulses through the water, communicating patterns that suggested better flight paths, ways to avoid obstacles, and techniques to gather information more efficiently. Together, human and alien expanded the possibilities of a simple machine, far beyond what either could achieve alone. By mid-afternoon, they had mapped a large section of the forest, discovering hidden clearings, clusters of unusual plants, and small animal species that Eli had never noticed before. Curiel was fascinated by the patterns of life, the flow of energy in the water, and the connections between creatures. She explained, in pulses of light and sound, that she had never seen a species like humans, capable of shaping their environment, thinking ahead, and adapting with ingenuity. Eli felt a swell of pride. Humanity was small compared to the stars, yes, but they were clever, creative, and full of potential. Later that day, Eli brought a simple telescope to the creek. He showed Curiel the night sky, pointing out the bright dots of distant stars. She responded by pulsing her skin with faint lights that seemed to mimic constellations. It was her way of communicating knowledge of the cosmos, of mapping what she had seen from her home planet, and the journey that had brought her here. Eli realized that the universe was no longer a mystery for him alone. He could begin to learn from her, expanding human understanding, one connection at a time. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. They learned to trust each other implicitly. Curiel would explore areas beyond the human settlement, sensing energy patterns and unusual phenomena, while Eli would interpret her findings, devise methods to study them safely, and document everything in his notebook. Humans had always thrived on curiosity, and now that trait extended beyond the limits of their own species, bridging the gap to an alien mind. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the treetops and the sky turned a deep purple, Eli and Curiel ventured further than ever before. The forest opened into a wide valley, a hidden gem of life and water that neither had discovered previously. Curiel's skin pulsed with excitement, reflecting the beauty of the place. Eli felt the same wonder he had felt when he first saw her at the creek, only now it was magnified by the scale of the discovery. They explored the valley together. Eli took samples of plants and soil, noting patterns in growth, while Curiel interacted with the water and energy around them, sensing connections that were invisible to humans. For the first time, Eli realized the full potential of human curiosity when paired with alien understanding. Humans could not yet travel across the stars, but they could explore, learn, and interact in ways that allowed them to grasp the universe piece by piece. Suddenly, Curiel's movements became urgent. Her skin pulsed rapidly, a series of bright, jagged patterns. Eli followed her gaze toward the horizon, where faint lights appeared in the distance. At first he feared another scout attack, but the shapes moved differently. Slow, deliberate, intelligent, yet not hostile. Curiel pulsed calmly, and Eli realized these were other beings like her, explorers perhaps. Coming to this world, Eli felt a rush of excitement. Humanity had survived its first contact with interstellar beings, not through weapons or force, but through ingenuity, empathy, and courage. And now the universe seemed ready to reveal itself further, offering opportunities for connection, learning, and growth. The newcomers approached the valley, and Curiel greeted them with pulses of light and patterns. Eli watched, fascinated. He understood enough of her communication to sense that they recognized her, understood her journey, and acknowledged the humans indirectly. It was a quiet celebration, a meeting of worlds that had been made possible by humanity's ability to reach out with curiosity rather than fear. Eli and Curiel spent the night in the valley, observing the newcomers from a safe distance. They communicated quietly, sharing thoughts through gestures, light, and intuition. Eli realized that humans had a role to play beyond their small settlement. They could learn, adapt, and form connections that might change the course of history, not through domination, but through intelligence, creativity, and empathy. Days turned into weeks, and the valley became a new place of learning. Eli worked tirelessly, documenting everything, while Curiel continued to teach him about energy, life, and exploration from her perspective. The two had become partners in every sense. Humans were limited by technology and biology, yet their minds were extraordinary tools. When guided by curiosity and tempered by care, humans could stand alongside beings from the stars, not as equals yet, but as collaborators. Eli often thought back to the day he first saw Curiel in the creek. He had been startled, amazed, and hesitant. Yet that moment had sparked a journey of discovery, courage, and understanding. Humanity had proven itself not by weapons, not by force, but by rising to the challenge with ingenuity, bravery, and heart. That same spark had changed Curiel, allowing her to see humans in a new light, and in turn, humanity to see itself in a new way. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant streaks of gold and orange, Ellie and Curiel sat together by a small stream within the valley. The water reflected their forms, human and alien, side by side. Curiel's face shimmered gently, her features blending alien and human elements in a way that symbolized connection, understanding, and mutual respect. Eli reached out and touched her hand, and for a moment the world seemed to disappear. All that existed was the creek, the forest, the valley, and the bond between them. Humanity's capacity for courage, creativity, and empathy had brought them here. It was not just survival. It was a triumph, a step toward a future where humans could stand among the stars and form friendships with beings they had once only dreamed of. Curiel's skin pulsed in response, gentle waves of light that communicated trust, understanding, and appreciation. Eli smiled, realizing that this bond was the truest measure of human strength. They had faced danger, learned from each other, and now stood at the threshold of a universe full of possibilities. The stars began to appear, one by one, painting the sky with distant suns. Eli pointed upward, sharing his knowledge of constellations, of planets, and of the human desire to explore. Curiel responded with pulses and tones, weaving patterns that told stories of her home, of her travels, and of the life she had observed across countless worlds. Together they created a tapestry of understanding that bridged species, distance, and imagination. As night deepened, Eli felt a sense of purpose unlike anything he had known. Humanity had survived its first contact with alien life, not by chance or force, but through intellect, empathy, and courage. They had proven that even the smallest beings could rise to unimaginable challenges, form bonds across species, and learn from the universe in ways that transcended fear. Curiel moved closer, resting her glowing form near him. Eli watched the reflections of stars in the creek, understanding that humanity's journey was only beginning. There were worlds to explore, dangers to face, and friendships to forge. But he felt ready. Humanity was ready. In that quiet moment, Eli realized that the universe was not a place of mere survival. It was a place of discovery, connection, and infinite potential. Humans, small and fragile though they might be, had the ingenuity, heart, and courage to rise to the impossible. They could stand alongside beings from the stars and leave their mark, not through violence, but through intelligence, curiosity, and empathy. Curiel's face shimmered again, a final acknowledgement of the bond they shared. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet Eli felt it deeply. Together, they had discovered not only each other, but the strength of humanity itself. And as the night deepened, the valley bathed in starlight. Eli understood a truth that would stay with him forever. Humans could rise, explore, and shine in the universe, and in doing so they could change everything. Not just for themselves, but for the stars, the creek whispered softly. The forest held its breath, and above them, the universe awaited, alive and full of possibility. Eli smiled, reaching for Curiel's hand once more. Together they would step into the unknown, fearless, curious, and unstoppable. Humanity had risen. Humanity had shone. And now they were ready for whatever the cosmos had in store.